let's talk about the AHL and the season that has just begun. And boy, was an exciting and interesting opening weekend across the AHL. I probably watched, I had multiple screens going. So I think I had at any one time at least 3 games going at once. I was trying to focus in on some that included some of the bigger prospects. And boy, did we get a lot to evaluate from that. A lot of really, really great performances individually, a lot of team performances. The Hershey Bears raised their 13th Calder Cup banner. Also, want to remind you, 2 weeks ago, we had Patrick Williams on. Patrick, of course, now the AHL beat writer for FloHockey. He's got a ton of great pieces out that you'll definitely want to read. And one of them is about Yaroslav Askarov. And this is a guy that I really have been tracking for years and years since I think the first time I saw him was at the 2019 or 2018 Hlinka Gretzky Cup. So he was a draft -1 at that event. And then we saw him again in the World Under-18s that year, where he had a tremendous showing against Team USA, basically cost them a shot at the gold medal. And we've been following his career going on. Now he's moved to the San Jose Sharks organization, got his very first start with the San Jose Barracuda. And what does he do? A 22-save shutout for the Barracuda. So this has been one of the really interesting goalies. He was one of the highest drafted goalies in the last decade, selected 11th overall by Nashville. He, of course, requested a trade out of Nashville. There really wasn't a path for him to becoming an NHL starter in Nashville. And while he could have continued to develop and, played his cards and whatever else and spent more time with Milwaukee, he wanted a clearer path to being a number one. UC Saros is not going anywhere anytime soon. So obviously there was going to be an opportunity. The San Jose Sharks put together a package to get Askarov to their NHL roster. Now, he didn't make the team out of camp. He was injured in training camp or injured before training camp, so he didn't really get many reps. So then they send him to the Barracuda, and he goes and has a shutout in his first game against the Ontario Reign. And really, it's kind of vintage Askarov, right? He's one of those guys that just does everything so well. And certainly a guy that, he's not always consistent. I think if there's anything that he doesn't do well, it's consistency. He's got a bit of an orthodox style. He's a little wild in the net, but he's incredibly athletic. He's incredibly competitive, and he's incredibly fun to watch. And of course, after he shut out the Ontario Reign, he did his patented close the net down, turn it over on its side, made sure that nothing was getting in for the rest of the night. Sorry, folks, we're closed. He turns that down, and then, it creates a great celebration. So that was one of the performances that really stood out. Another great goaltending performance was another goalie we've talked a lot about on this podcast over the last few years. He played in the ECHL 2 years ago, AHL all of last season, was a first-round draft pick as well, and that's Sebastian Cossa, currently of the Grand Rapids Griffins in the Detroit Red Wings organization. And Cossa had a 35-save shutout in his season debut. He did play back-to-back, gave up 4 goals the next night in a loss. But again, this is the learning curve that the Detroit Red Wings want him to be on. He's going to have those highs and those lows. Playing in back-to-back games in particular is a challenge, and that's one of the things that they're doing to ramp him up to being an NHL starter. Anymore, it's very rare where goalies will start on back-to-back nights at the NHL level, but it is an important skill for him to develop now in the AHL in the event that he does have to be a back-to-back starter in the NHL. So all of these opportunities that he's had, that's really important. And so we're seeing that repeatedly where he's getting these opportunities, he's getting the reps. Now, the Red Wings just sent Ville Husso down to the AHL. They also have Malcolm Subban down there. So Cossa doesn't have to play all the time, but he should be getting probably close to 50 games this season. And that's really going to be the telltale sign for him in terms of his readiness. Now, his numbers have been the same over the last 2 years, both in Toledo in the ECHL 2 years ago and Grand Rapids last year. Grand Rapids went on a run. He went on a huge run as well, where they just weren't losing games. And that level of consistency is what he needs to continue to establish in order to make that next step. But we're seeing it. Watching AHL games on FloHockey, I continue to see the progression of these players. I watched a lot of them last year. Now I'm going to be watching them even closer this year because of the ease that I have now that it's part of what we do here at Flo. And really, guys like Askarov and Cossa and everybody else and these goalies, it's all about reps and time and getting used to things. And some guys can get used to it really quick. Some guys it's going to take a few years. And then sometimes it's just a matter of what the NHL roster looks like. And I think teams are taking this patient approach with development, particularly with goaltenders, and it allows these players to really flourish and then arrive to the NHL ready. There are plenty of players that are ready to play in the NHL. There are fewer players that are ready to make an impact at the NHL level. The AHL has traditionally been a place where they're able to kind of establish that. And that's why when we saw Kevin Korchinski of the Chicago Blackhawks, now of the Rockford IceHogs, he spent all of last season in the NHL. Not typical that you're going to see a guy get sent back to the AHL after spending an entire season at the NHL level. Last year, Korchinski was ready to play in the NHL. He was not necessarily ready to make an impact. He did play pretty well. There were a lot of great nights for him, but there wasn't that level of consistency. In the first game he plays for the Rockford IceHogs, his first ever AHL game, he goes coast to coast. And now if you're a Chicago Blackhawks fan, you're like, see, he shouldn't be down there. He shouldn't be down there. No. Let me tell you, why is he down there? He's down there to get minutes. He's not going to get the top 4 minutes with the NHL roster. We talked about this with Patrick Williams 2 weeks ago. We're going to talk about it again because when you see those plays and you see a player dominate or make a very advanced play, as Korchinski did by going coast to coast and scoring a goal, you say, okay, well, he's obviously ready. Let's see him do that repeatedly. Let's see him continue to take over games. Let's see him take over a shift. Let's see him run their power play. Let's see him do things that top defensemen do. And, Scott Powers from The Athletic wrote a story about Korchinski, spoke with Korchinski, and he's on board with what the Blackhawks are doing. And that is so, so important. Player buy-in on a development plan is probably one of the single most important things to getting them to where they need to be. If the player doesn't believe he should be in the AHL and he doesn't work like and it either saps his confidence or he's not taking it seriously, that can have a detrimental effect. But Korchinski is too important to the Blackhawks rebuild that he has to be in this place. So I think it's a great place for him to be. And he showed that by having a very strong game against Grand Rapids. That was the team that put 4 goals up on Sebastian Cossa, one of those being Korchinski's goal. And also shout out to Rockford for the Screw City jerseys that they were rocking, all blacks, and they looked pretty darn good there as well. A couple of other prospects that stood out on opening weekend. Logan Mailloux, 4-point game against Providence for Laval, had 2 goals, 2 assists, and was the best player on the ice. I mean, just bar none, best player on the ice. He's number 1 defenseman for Laval. The next night he struggled. And again, with Logan Mailloux, it's not about offense. We already know he can produce. We already know he has skill. It's the play away from the puck. It's the ability to shut down the opposition. It's ability to use your size to your advantage. And that's going to be a learning process still. So just because he had 4 points right away doesn't mean he's going to get that call up immediately to the Habs. And as we've seen, I watched the Montreal game last night. And I watched Lane Hudson because he's one of the most fascinating players. Offensively, he's doing all of the things that he could do in college. Defensively, it's been a bit of a struggle. And in that game in particular against Pittsburgh, it was a real struggle for him. So those are the types of things. You need Logan Mailloux to get to a certain level. And we'll see, if Lane Hudson, it seems like he's going to be able to have to learn at the NHL level how to defend at that level. But clearly his offensive game is advanced enough to do it. Also wanted to give a little notice on Aiden McDonough, and he was the player of the week in the AHL last weekend. 4 goals, had a hat trick on opening night, another power play goal the next day for the Charlotte Checkers. Now, Aiden McDonough was a draft pick, a 7th round draft pick of the Vancouver Canucks. He far exceeded draft expectations by having a great collegiate career with Northeastern. He goes there, has, a big time goal scorer. Last season in the AHL, he really struggled. He could not get that scoring touch. He could not get that level of consistency. Vancouver opts not to sign him. He doesn't get an NHL contract anywhere else. Now he's back in the AHL, and he's only 24 years old, and he had 4 goals on the opening weekend. This is a player that's taking it seriously, that's saying, I want to get back, and I will do what I have to do to get back. If he keeps scoring like that, he's going to get another crack at the NHL, especially at his age. Saw Brad Lambert and Nikita Chibrikov watch their games against Iowa this weekend for the Manitoba Moose. Really talented offensively. Chibrikov has certainly taken a step. His strength is improved. Brad Lambert, we already knew he was an NHL level skater. That is the case. 3 assists for him this weekend for Manitoba in a sweep. And I really liked what I saw from Marco Kasper as well. A lot of Detroit fans thought that Kasper should be on the big roster. didn't necessarily make it. They bring him back there. And he has a real good opportunity to continue to be a leading player for the Grand Rapids Griffins. He even got into a fight with Colton Dock, who's a couple inches taller and about 20 pounds heavier, I think. And those two guys got into a very spirited scrap, and Casper handled himself well. I think, long-term Marco Casper is probably going to be a really talented middle six center. But this gives him an opportunity to see, hey, is there a little more there? By being in Rockford. And then also, lastly, with this, the Hershey Bears raised their banner one night. Ethan Frank scores a hat trick in the banner raising night. They have a win. The next night, Ivan Miroshnichenko has a hat trick for Hershey to get the win. They did not get the win in that game, but Miroshnichenko, who was, a guy that I think we thought might make the Capitals, he's again going through and taking part of the process and scoring 3 goals on opening weekend and making an impact. And boy, is his shot looking real good right now. Watched, all 3 of his goals. We've got them all clipped for you. You can see a ton of AHL highlights on FloHockey.tv, on the Flow Sports app, and on our YouTube page. I mean, go ahead and watch that because he was uncorking on some of those pucks there. Ivan Miroshnichenko, I think, is on a fast track here. And to think of how far that young man has come. He went through cancer in his draft year. He still gets drafted in the first round. Think about the faith that the Washington Capitals had in the player, and he is making good on that by playing very well.